My name is Carol and welcome everyone to this live. Thank you so much for joining us. We are Parentally, a platform dedicated to the well-being of new and future parents. And what we do is we share professional support. We facilitate access to professional support, community support, and informational support. Today we are going to talk about family language management with our two guests who are language consultants, Daphne Vlachojannis, I hope I pronounced it correctly, and Marian Potvin. Thank you so much for joining us, for doing this live with us. I think it's going to be very interesting and much valuable. Would you like maybe to start by introducing yourselves?
Yes, sure. Maria, go ahead.
So my name is Maria Potvin. I am a mom of two multilingual children. They're growing with three main languages, plus a couple more in the background. I have a degree in linguistics and specialize in teaching multilingual learners. That's pretty much in a nutshell.
Thank you.
And my name is Daphne Vlachojannis. I'm a mother of three multilingual children. They're 10, 7, and 3, and their languages are Greek, French, and English. My background is that I was an international human rights lawyer for 20 years. And with my first child, I hired Dr. Eowyn Crisfield to do a family language plan for my family. And I went back to her each time I had a child, and eventually she told me to come and work with her. And so that's what happened, basically. And a few years ago, Maria and I came on board to Raising Bilingual Children. And now I'm advising my clients based on my own experience in raising my 3 kids multilingually, and based on the academic training that I've been undergoing.
Awesome. Thank you so much both for introducing yourselves. I'm very happy to have you today to do this live session. We've had so many questions about this topic, and I think it's one of the first questions we ask ourselves when we are a multilingual family. I think the idea today of this live is to go through all the main challenges that international families meet when it comes to language management in bilingual, but also multilingual families. I just wanted to say before we start that this session is recorded, so if you cannot make it until the end, I will share it in the feed, of course. But yeah, let's get started. I think it would be interesting to talk about your experience. What are, in your experience, the most common challenges that families face when it comes to language management?
I would say there's two that there are many, of course, but there are two that popped into my mind just sort of at the top of my head as the most challenging. One is actually English. English is so prevalent that it takes over, and we hear this from so many clients, and especially once children start school, if they start school in English, it becomes the dominant language, and then they don't want to use the home language. So that is the main sort of challenge that clients come to us with. Another challenge is that children don't seem to want to use the home language once they start school, whatever language. And so, for example, a concrete case that came to me recently, a Romanian couple, and the child was speaking Romanian at home for the first 4 years and then started school in Dutch. And once the child was a few months in the Dutch school, started responding to the parents in Romanian. And the parents were sort of tempted to respond in Dutch just to make things sort of smoother. And the Dutch school actually told the parents to respond in Dutch, which is the problem, which is advice we often hear. I won't go into now why this is problematic, but this sort of advice that we often hear that clients are given in certain schools is to leave and supposedly help the children with the school language. And so the parents are very confused as to what to do, and they're frustrated that the child won't speak the home language anymore. and they get into this this sort of quagmire at home where nobody knows what to speak. So I would say those are the two biggest challenges that we hear.
Mm-hmm. Is there a clear answer to what language should be spoken at home, and especially if there are several languages? Let's say if the father speaks French and the mother speaks English, and then I don't know, school is in Dutch. Is there a rule, or is it depending on the family and the dynamics? It's a complicated question, but it's something you hear all the time. Right?
Yeah.
It's definitely, there's not a hard and fast rule. Yeah. There's some guidelines. Mm-hmm. I mean, it actually depends on the family and the situation. Basically, we hear very often that you are supposed to speak to your children in your mother tongue, right?
Okay.
Quotes, because what is mother tongue, what is father tongue, we don't really know anymore, and we don't use the term so often anymore. But a dated advice that a lot of people are given is you're supposed to use your mother tongue and only speak one language. Each person is supposed to speak one language exclusively for the child. And now research has shown that we can actually be a lot more flexible. Okay. More people are speaking languages with their children that are not actually their own first language. But English, but the other languages as well. And as long as you speak, basically, I think there's a golden rule for this, for what language should you speak or can you speak with your children. I think there's some guidelines to follow. It doesn't have to be your first language. Of course, it is, but it doesn't have to be. But if it's not, I would say the guidelines to keep in mind are a language, obviously, that you speak fluently, but also a language that you feel comfortable in, and that you feel yourself in that language, and that you have the language to be able to use with your children, because you don't want to use a language that you've only used for work, let's say, and you don't have effective language, and you don't want it to feel forced. I would also say it doesn't matter if you have an accent in that language. So feel free to choose a language to speak to children that, if you can speak it absolutely fluently, perfectly even, but you have an accent. A lot of clients say, am I allowed to use English with my child? I have really an accent. We want to debunk the myth that accent equals, a lack of proficiency. That's absolutely not the case. Most speakers of English in the world are actually not native speakers, so everybody has an accent. Even native speakers have accents. So it's great for kids to be able to understand different accents. And an accent is not at all an indicator of fluency. It's just an indicator of identity and of influences of others. So that's a long answer to your question of what language did you speak?
This is an excellent answer. Honestly, this is quite liberating for someone who has an accent, a French accent, a very strong French accent. When I talk Dutch or English to my kids, so I loved hearing this. To be honest, thank you.
I think a lot of people to hear. Exactly, we put a lot of restraints on each other, on ourselves, of what we are allowed to our kids. We have this monolingual, Mimi always says this, and I absolutely agree, that this monolingual standard, the myth of the monolingual, that we're all supposed to sound like a monolingual, absolutely not the case.
There is another question that we got a lot, is there a maximum number of languages that you should speak in a family?
Well, this always, pardon me, this always depends. It's, like you can speak as many as you want, of course, but then at the end, how much input and how much quality exposure can you provide in each of those languages? And this also goes with this myth that kids just learn language and it's just natural to them. They absorb it, they move on, which is not the case. And how many languages, where the cutoff line is basically for a family, is very, very individual for each family. It depends on what goals you have set for each of those languages. So this is where we need to start which languages you have. Do you want to maintain all of them? For example, German is one of our family languages, but
Mm-hmm.
we have decided to postpone the exposure a little bit and start a little bit later because right
Mm-hmm.
now we're focused on Bulgarian, English, and Dutch. And
Mm-hmm.
we want to make sure that we provide enough quality exposure in those languages so they
Mm-hmm.
can be built to a certain level. We can be on the road to achieving our goals and then start integrating other languages,
Mm-hmm.
in this case, German, start integrating it a little bit later. So it all comes down to the individual goals, wishes, wants,
Mm-hmm.
needs for each family. And there is no blanket answer. How much is enough? How many
Mm-hmm.
languages? What's the maximum? Because it's different for each family.
Mm-hmm. That's very interesting. And if I may ask, when you say a quality exposure to the language, what do you mean exactly? Let's say when you have three languages like this
Mhm.
at the same time, what would be a quality exposure?
Above all else, varied. Because
Okay.
if you think about what you do at home,
Mm-hmm.
the kind of language that you use is very similar. It
Mm-hmm.
evolves around your daily activities,
Mm-hmm.
having dinner, brushing teeth, getting dressed, and did you write your homework, like all those things.
Mm-hmm.
And then quality exposure goes beyond that.
Mm-hmm.
Reading
Okay.
about different topics. So it comes down to providing enough vocabulary
Mm-hmm.
so that the child can
I see.
can amass
Mm-hmm.
more vocabulary around certain topics that are also different for different families.
Mm-hmm.
And then the child can learn how to work with the language and start building this language. So it needs to be varied. And this is usually achieved by, for example, reading, playing
Mm-hmm.
different games, and a lot of different kinds of input, talking to different people, going to museums, and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you were talking about debunking some myths and misconceptions. Let's dive into this because there are so many.
They are,
In your
yes.
experience, what are the most common misconceptions about language management?
Yeah, there are lots. Um, for example, one of the very common ones is that for a bilingual child, when we say bilingual, we mean
Mm-hmm.
with more than one language.
Yes. Okay.
So it can be, people expect that all the languages will be developed
Mm-hmm.
on to the same level. And in order for somebody to be considered a successful bilingual speaker for a child,
Mm-hmm.
the languages should be developed to a monolingual level, and only then is the child considered by certain people a monolingual, a
Mm-hmm.
successful
Bilingual.
bilingual.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is absolutely not true because we don't, our languages develop differently. And um, yeah, this is one very common myth that is expected that each language should be
Mm-hmm.
developed to the level of a monolingual speaker.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Another very, very common myth is that children who grow up with multiple languages, they start speaking later than
Mm-hmm.
monolingual children,
Mm-hmm.
or that they are expected to experience some sort of language delay, which is also not true
Mm-hmm.
because if you look at a monolingual child who starts speaking later, nobody would think about blaming the
Mm-hmm.
language. They would look for different problems and
True.
different issues. But if a child grows up with more than one language, everybody is very quick to blame um, all the
Mm-hmm.
languages and the confusion and which is almost never the case.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's very true.
Um, yeah, and another very common one is that once the child starts getting older,
Mm-hmm.
um, basically the ship has sailed. They can't learn um, another home language that they have not been exposed to, or that they'll have a really hard time learning a language.
Mm-hmm.
So the message we want to send is it's never too late.
Mm-hmm.
You can always start. And it always depends on the environment
Mm-hmm.
that is created for this language to be developed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Nice. That's good to hear.
Yeah.
It's never too
Just
late.
a short answer. Yeah.
Yes, but that's very clear. And actually, I also have three other questions that we have received in direct messages for this live. The first one was, is it okay to reply in another language than the question that's been asked? Like I guess when your children ask you a question, let's say in English, is it okay to reply in French, for instance, because it's your language? Or should you stick to the same language within the same discussion? Is it clear what I
Yes,
said? I don't know.
it's very clear.
Absolutely.
I can take this one if it's okay. I think that this is something that actually comes up, not in exactly those words, but something that comes up very often, in the fact that children will inevitably respond in their dominant language. Not inevitably, most of the time they'll respond to us in their dominant language, and that might not be the language that we're speaking to them in. And actually, not only is it okay to respond to them in your own language or in a different language that they're speaking, it is actually imperative if you want to pass on your language. So what we call it is feeding it back to them. So for example, if the child asks, you're speaking to your child in French, which is your language, and the child asks you a question in English, you feed it back to them in French. So you don't ask them to repeat it because you don't want to turn learning into a chore for them, but you feed it back to them. In other words, repeat it in your language. And it's really actually difficult to do. Where a lot of parents drop the ball is they don't get the response that they want. They don't get a response in their language, and so they sort of let the child lead, and they switch over to the dominant language, usually English, and that's when you sort of lose the plot, because if you drop it and if you drop your language, eventually you're not going to pass it on. But if you continue to speak to your child in your language, even though they're responding in English or in whatever other language, it is getting through. And it's hard to do because you feel like it's not getting through, and it's frustrating to hear them respond to you in a different language. But if you can do that, you will reap the benefits later. It is all getting in there. And I speak from personal experience. At some point, they will start responding to you in your language.
Okay. Well, that's good news. Thank you very much. And the other question is, can a child learn to read in several languages at the same time?
Well, at the same time, we always say it always depends on the child. Again, everything about this topic has to do with children being very individual and different from each other. So some children really enjoy those kinds of activities, and you can totally do it at the same time. But for the majority of children, it might get difficult. So the general advice, again, not considering any individual factors, we would give is try to start with the school language first. Give them, let's say, a year to learn the mechanics of it, sort of, the writing, the reading. And then, again, depending on the child's interest, you can slowly start introducing reading and writing in the other language, let's say in the home language, in a playful way, and again, following the child's interests. Because if a child gets pushed too much, what happens is it yields the opposite effect. And you don't want that. You want them to keep being interested in reading and writing. And what's really important to mention with this question is that reading and writing, those are transferable skills. So once you learn the mechanics in one language, it's very easy to transfer those skills in another language. And what needs to be learned is those intricacies of each language, different sound combinations, different letters. My son, for example, he just started in the Bulgarian school 2 weeks ago, and he was I wasn't sure how it's going to go because it's a different script. And he has surprised me because he can write in English and Dutch. He can read in English and Dutch. And so we are working on the different letters, but the writing and the reading is going very fast.
That's amazing.
Yeah, because it is a transferable skill, and because he's already learned and practiced it in a couple of years, and he knows how it goes. We're just learning about the differences now. So it's yeah.
That's good to hear. And actually, we got another question. Do we still have time for you both? Is it okay?
Yes,
Can we continue? Yes.
absolutely.
So I cannot pronounce the name Diskaya, but she asked, what if none of the parents speak the school language Dutch? And I guess the question is, if you don't speak Dutch, either of the parents, can you still send your kids to the Dutch school, even if you don't speak the language?
Mimi, I'll let you take this
I
one
can
because you're.
answer because this is us. The decision which school to choose again is very individual. First of all, regardless of whether the parents speak the language or not, because it has to do with other factors. For example, how long you're planning on staying in the country, what goals you have, because Dutch education and international education are quite different. So once you kind of answer those questions, the answer is absolutely yes. If you decide to send your child to a Dutch school, I don't see any issues about the parents not speaking it, because this is our situation. And both our kids are in Dutch school. My daughter is group 1, my son is group 6. And it's been going fantastic, and we're learning Dutch with them. We're helping with homework as well. There are many different ways to do this when you don't speak the language. And we're learning as well with them, which is a great opportunity to have your child help you with learning the school language.
Does it become a requirement to learn the language yourself, do you feel, in your opinion, when you have the kids who are in Dutch school? I mean, in the long term, I guess. And I think that's also a personal question for me because I don't speak Dutch, but my kids are in the Dutch school, and I kind of feel like at some point I won't be able to follow up with them, and it kind of makes me a bit anxious.
My personal opinion is that if you live in a country where the majority language is different than any language you speak, it's always a good idea, regardless of
Yes.
school or not, because it's great for integration. And if you have children in school in the majority language, it's always a good idea to learn some. I'm not saying, because everybody is busy, and I'm not saying go to classes and study, but learning a little bit just to get along, just to get around. I mean, to be able to speak to a little bit, just basic conversations to their friends, that will make you feel more comfortable in the environment.
That's very true. That's very true. Thank you very much for this answer. I think we are nearing the end of this live, but thank you very much. Maybe as the last question, what would be your golden tip for parents who are raising bilingual children? One golden tip.
We can each say one.
Yeah.
Okay. Mine would be to have a plan. And I'm not saying not everybody needs to have a very detailed or sophisticated plan, but it's great. And it's my golden tip to have an idea and some roadmap of what you're trying to achieve and how you're planning to achieve it. The reason for this is we live in a monolingual country, and the majority language is the main language. And that's the reason why a lot of the home languages get lost. And it's really hard to support those languages. But when you have a plan, when you have some sort of an idea what you're trying to achieve and how you're going to achieve it, it becomes becomes easier to support the home languages because each language that a family has in their life is a part of a child's identity, and
Yeah.
it helps them develop, and it helps them helps with their emotional well-being, helps with their cognitive development, and just helps them become a well-rounded individual. Yeah, that's for me.
I,
Excellent advice. So true.
I would absolutely echo Mimi's golden rule to have a plan, because we have so many clients who have come to us when it's sort of too late, or much later than would be easy to implement a plan. The earlier you come, the better. Pregnancy is actually ideal already. Yeah. Because when you have the baby already at home, it's really difficult to have the mental wherewithal to get them in place. And so many clients who come to us and say, "I had my baby, I didn't even know what language to speak to him, and I was not, I was not able to speak because I didn't know what to speak." We've heard this more times than I can remember.
Okay.
So Amy's absolutely right. I think golden rule number one is to have a plan. And I mean, this is what we do with families, me and me. And I think the golden rule too would really be to just have fun with it and make sure that you don't do anything that doesn't feel natural. Don't force yourselves to speak a language with your child that you yourself are not yourself in, just to teach your kid the language, because the connection with your child is so much more important than teaching them any language.
Yeah,
Excellent advice. Yes,
I
thank you.
can
Go
just
ahead.
give you a personal example about
Yeah.
what Daphne said, because I lived in Germany for 19 years, and my son was 3.5 when we moved here, and I've been speaking Bulgarian to him ever since he was born. And when we moved here, I've heard from many people. Um, they asked me, so why do you continue speaking Bulgarian to your child? Why didn't you continue with the German? Because German is a lot more, um, it's a more useful language. And it's absolutely true in the grand scheme of things. But, and I could have done it, but I have a deeper emotional connection with my son in Bulgarian and to the other language. So this is the most important
Yeah,
thing.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well noted. Thank you so much for sharing this. I think that's very clear and indeed very important. Could you please tell us a bit more about what you do to support parents with raising bilingual children, your company?
Yes, we have several services. Start, and then maybe you can finish with explaining them. But so our main service is what we just talked about, making a plan. It's called a language planning package.
Okay.
Of three parts. The first is the 9 consultation, either in person or online. You really delve into the specifics of your weekly plan, how much language input in each language is happening, how to tweak it so that you get the required input to reach your goals. We set the goals with the family of what level of they want for each language. Then we go off and write a report, a written plan, and then we ask our clients to try to implement it. And in about 6 months' time, we have another follow-up session to see how it's going and what questions have come up. This is our main service that we have for clients. Another service we have is what's called a targeted consultation. It's usually for people who have already had a plan, a family language plan with us, and want to just ask some small questions. But it can also be for people who don't have a plan already. And it's just 30 minutes, very targeted questions for us.
Yeah, yeah. Essentially, what it comes down to is we take the scientific evidence, we take the practical aspect and best practice day to day, based on experience, based on collected experience from many different sources. We put it together and we match it to the individual needs of each single family, because each family is unique. And even though, it often seems that, each family is dealing, or many families are dealing with similar things. and people would think, oh, there is this one solution. It's never like that, because
Mm-hmm.
every family is very unique in their own wants and needs and experiences and beliefs and convictions, and so on. So that's what we do. We take best practice, scientific evidence, and we match it to the family, and we help them find the best way for them to reach their goals.
Mm-hmm. And I think you touched a very important point that every family is unique and every family has its own needs. And I think that's one of the main thing that I will take away from this live session, is that there is no blanket solution for everyone. But thank you so much for sharing all these insights and tips. I think it's going to be very helpful and valuable for all the families who listen to this live. Thank you so much for doing this live session with us. And thank you very much, everyone who watched this session today. I hope you enjoyed it. I will share it on the feed and our YouTube channel very soon, along with all the contact details of Maria and Daphne and Raising Bilingual Children. Thank you so much. I don't know what to say anymore, but thank you so much. Have a beautiful day, everyone. Please don't forget to subscribe to this channel so you don't miss any of the new videos. Have a great day, and thank you.
Thank
You very much.
you, Carol.
Thanks for having us.
Bye.
Bye.
With
Bye.
pleasure.